5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
You're listening to Relentless. This is the show for high performers who are driven and committed to being at their best. Nick Peterson and Jonathan Montgomery, co-founders of Relentless Dietetics, are your hosts.
Welcome to the Relentless Podcast. I'm Nick Peterson, hanging out today with Jonathan Montgomery.
What is up?
And the Dr. Trevor Cashy.
Hello.
And we're here again today to talk about getting a little bit better every day. Now, when you look at the difference between good and great, whether it be good and great people, athletes, companies, a lot of them have the same innate ability, and often what separates them is who their coaches and mentors were, who kind of led them as they were growing, right? So books, articles, internet research, that stuff is great, but by and large, it is mostly abstract theory. And on its own, going through books, reading articles, doing your internet research, it's going to take years and years and years to implement and stress test. And more importantly, it's going to take years and years and years to figure out what the feedback means if you ever even do.
Yeah, you got to understand that knowledge alone is always going to be less than action when it comes to making progress, and being paramount to your success. To truly get better every day, you have to do something to get better every day. Information is going to be everywhere, but clarity is not. Clarity is rare, and it's typically the missing link between the best and the rest, and taking the action you want to take to get you somewhere versus, as you pointed out, stress testing and spinning your wheels and trying to hope you get it right based on what you read online.
You guys are differentiating well the point, like, do you want to learn something or do you want to do something? And they are two different things. Learning stuff and doing stuff are not the same. Some stuff you kind of have to do it in order to learn it, and some stuff you don't. There's a classic, like, you can read books on how to ride bikes all day long. You'll never know how to ride a bike unless you do it. And I would just tell you to not read a book about how to ride bikes and read a book that's useful. So anyway, well, I'll rant on that later. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Nick.
There's actually a book called You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar. And that's kind of it's a sales book, but that's the overall view is you got to do it. Good coaches and mentors are not shortcutting the process. I think that's the important thing to remember, because a good process really is the shortcut. Their value is in streamlining the process and stopping you from making the mistakes that you are inevitably going to make on your own, or getting distracted, or just kind of being a ding dong, as Trevor would say in general.
Yeah, like you said, Dr. Cashy, when it comes down to, do you want to do something or do you want to learn something? Learning something is great as long as you know that you're going in to learn it. But if you want to do it, I think a lot of times, you can learn from those that have learned before you. Can you do it all on your own? Figure it all out, collect enough information, devise a plan, remain objective, accurately evaluate, adjust, recalibrate, move forward. Yeah, I'm sure it's possible. I'm sure it's been done before. Honestly, with the internet providing a network of near limitless flow and availability of information, you could probably collect enough technical knowledge to conduct a brain surgery. But how many times are you going to mess that up before you finally get it right? And what's going to be the cost of that? And to me, that's the key factor is time. Balancing the cost of a mentor and the time saved finding success versus the cost of lost time and frustration of going it alone and still not getting where you want to be. Good coaches are a lot like bumpers on a bowling alley. May not always allow you to strike, but they're going to keep you out of the gutter and save you from yourself, provided you actually are listening and committed to being coachable. But that's another topic.
Yeah, whether somebody's coachable or not is something that we harp on pretty hard. Like Jonathan said, bumpers is one of my favorite analogies. It's kind of like, hey, look, we're not bowling for you. You still got to pick up the ball. You got to learn the skill. Like Trevor said, you're doing it, right? We're just keeping you out of the gutter. And that's super important. that you're learning the skill, and we're just kind of preventing, or a good coach or mentor is going to prevent any like serious damage. And once you understand the concept that a good coach or a good mentor or a good program is really like a set of bumpers, the difficult part is finding someone or a group of people that you trust to be your bumpers. We'll probably have Trevor rant on trust another time because that's a whole episode on its own. So as far as finding somebody you trust, we'll kind of go back and forth on that. But Ray Dalio in his book Principles and some of his TED Talks explains what he calls the believability factor. And we've kind of adopted that word. We talk about believability. And it's just, is this person believable? Are these coaches believable? Do they have a track record? Is there a repeated record of success? And do they have a proven process? Basically, do we know that this is not just a result of luck?
Yeah, this is huge. As always, you really have to consider your source when you're getting information and especially advice. Whether it's your Instagram Fit Pro, your entrepreneur or travel blogger, or, insert whatever expert here, your hairstylist, as Nick likes to say. Just because an individual has accomplished something themselves, or at least gives the perception that they have, it does not mean they are the right person to help you out. Doing what a world-class athlete does now, following their training, their diet, etc., it may not help you become a better athlete as quickly and efficiently as following a plan tailored to address your weaknesses rather than one that lets them capitalize on their successes. Big thing on the internet now, hustling and grinding 100 hours a week, missing watching your children grow up. This may indeed not be your best bet for the highest quality of life if that's what you're going out after. Working with what's right for you versus working with what's right for someone else. The right coach and the right mentor is going to help by providing an analysis and applying perspective that's individual to you and your situation, following a proven track record with similar people and circumstances to get you where you want to be.
Yeah, that's what led me to Trevor, ultimately, is consistent, repeated success with people that we had as mutual friends or that I knew that otherwise had been unsuccessful. So these aren't people that are genetically gifted or whatever. He's doing something to help these people that otherwise have not been able to get help. So the consistent repeated success is there. The track record's there. And in the process, he's a scientist. So he has a process, the scientific one.
I'm the one stupid enough to go through the 15 years of trial and error to give everyone else the distilled practical information.
Correct. The expert in the room. But like Nick just said, I couldn't agree any more with that. Consistent, repeated success and a systematic process. That's the exact same reason I ended up getting in touch with Trevor. Hands down, the best way to make consistent, measurable improvements in the right direction is to find someone smarter than you, more successful than you, more experienced than you, and has a more proven record than you've had, and just shut up and listen. This was an extremely easy thing to do for me when it came to working with Dr. Kashi. He's a pretty believable guy when it comes to his background and his track record. Something about the whole got a PhD at 23 and coaching Olympians made me realize he could probably help me out without having to dig too deep into his old pool of knowledge there. I certainly wasn't anything special. But when Trevor did start coaching me, I just did what he said and let the magic happen. Let's face it, not only was attempting to argue with him ridiculously futile, because he's pretty much always right, but it would also be extremely counterproductive in terms of me achieving my goals. It's what I'm paying him for. It's what I'm here for, is to listen to his expertise. So rather than just spend time arguing with him, I just focused on executing and let time be the judge. So far, 4 years later, so good. So I think I made a solid choice there by trusting him to be pretty believable.
Yeah. Again, trust. We're going to have to do another episode on that, I think.
Absolutely.
Cool. So let's bounce back and forth and just talk about some of the important qualities of a good coach or mentor. Something practical for the listeners to look for. One would be objectivity, just being able to remove the emotional component in the decision-making process.
Yeah. Is there a process, first of all, and is it objectively based or is it subjectively based? What is the process based on? Is it grounded in a solid foundation, or any proven principles, or is it just some theories and some feels? Is it analytically examining data, or is it open to personal interpretation? Is it successful? Is it proven? Are you testing, retesting? What metrics are you using? Are you taking any measurements? Is the process adapting to what occurs or any unanticipated challenges that may manifest? Or is it a formulaic one-off solution that's effective only in a vacuum? We are really big on what can be measured, can be managed. If you're in a process, are they even using any metrics to gauge its efficacy? Are the metrics used to gauge progress the ones you need to improve in? How do you know? And do you trust them to help you find out? I think it's really key that you have somebody that can be those outside eyes so you don't get so caught up into the day-to-day personal struggles.
I would say a classic example of something like this is the person who's out of shape, carrying a few extra pounds, that starts a diet program, an exercise program, and a supplement program, and starts going to church. And 4 or 5 months later, they're new people, and it was whatever supplement they took that gave them all the results, right? And it was really a combination of things, right? The community from the church environment, the activity from exercise, the calorie control from changing their diet, and possibly whatever they took and whatever supplement they took may or may not have had an effect. But being able to consider the facts represented as they are, like that is it, and then use that to make informed decisions with the caveat that the decision will have a bias, but really looking at the facts as they are before you start interjecting your own personal flavor into things is really the easiest way to keep things impartial. And that allows both parties to be on the same page the whole time. Because if there is a ton of personal bias interjected into the decision-making process, it is tough to tell what your coach is doing. It kind of adds like this Oz behind the curtain sort of like mentality or situation where it makes it kind of feel like somebody may be doing magic if the results are good. But if you're not measuring what you need to measure, then it makes it difficult to see how the decisions are informed. And if you get positive results in a happenstance manner, that's good, right now. But the ability to continue to make progress in any way, shape, or form after you've stumbled through haphazard progress like most people do when they're beginning any new venture, it makes life much more difficult. And it's more difficult to tease out which things need to be changed in order to continue progressing. Because things aren't looked at in, like Nick said, an objective manner. The facts are not considered as facts, and you do end up getting feelings and, in a lot of cases, opinions that are confused as facts mixed in the decision-making process.
No, I think what you keyed on in there too is great too, and it couples back with exactly what we said about following a systematic process too. How are we going to change 47 things at once and know what caused that change? And I think that's a big problem with a lot of people, mowing their own lawn, so to speak, is they basically want to do everything all at once and then pick whatever they think was the catalyst for all that change. I think it's important to have that impartial outside eye so you're not able to do that and not able to cherry pick what you want it to be versus what it actually was that brought about change.
Yeah, sorry to go off of the objective thing. Like Nick brought it up. Probably there's the first thing for a reason.
Cool. Second quality is really going to be that there has to be some sort of connection as well. Jonathan and Trevor, both, you talked about understanding this process, taking this data, making sure there is a process, there's reasons for it. The second quality is going to be able to communicate, and they need to help bring you back to reality. So it goes right back to being objective, but what does this mean for me in reality, not based on my feels?
Personally for me, this is a big one. We are absolutely fantastic at telling ourselves stories and believing a false narrative constructed solely off the subjective, how we feel, how we think we look, all of these things that are just really all in our head. 4 years of tracking my food to the gram under Trevor, and I am no closer to managing my own intake as my goals and composition changes, because I simply don't have the ability to remain objective and get out of my own head when it comes to making a personal evaluation. I just don't. And I'm okay with that. And I understand that. I get it. I'm broken. We're all broken. We all need help. Fantastic. I'm totally accepting of that. The time saved and the stress alleviated from eliminating the analysis paralysis that I have, it's just been an absolute game changer. Instead of wondering and worrying and listening to the voices in my head, I simply trust Dr. Kashey, his process, and execute. And that really kind of lets me stay focused on making progress and not become my own worst enemy.
If you're ready to get the body you desire without depriving yourself of the foods you enjoy, download your free diet playbook now at www.relentlesspodcast.com.
If people don't know, right, Jonathan, you're probably the most advanced food dude I know, because I don't know what else to call you, so you're a food dude. Even at the highest level. And that's why I think this conversation is so important. People need to understand that even at the highest level, you are not the best person to make every single decision for yourself. And this also allows you to triangulate with other smart people. That's why we all kind of got together, right? We all thought we were good. We're all good at what we do. But it allows you to triangulate with other smart people, and you can expose one another's blind spots. It becomes more of a mastermind, inner circle, hive type deal.
Yeah, I am a big fan of utilizing the hive mind and the collective experience, whether it's for information, positive support, or just reaching your potential. As T pointed out earlier, you don't necessarily have to do all the learning to learn from someone else having done it. The same way mistakes don't have to be yours for you to learn from them and turn them into lessons. When you start realizing that everyone is just an amalgamation of influences, that there's really no such thing as a self-made man, and instead we're simply a sum of the people we spend the most time with, and the information we consume, you really want to ensure you're drawing from the best possible pool of influence. That's going to be extremely beneficial. It's been absolutely life-changing for me, and it's something that I can't stress enough. And it's also the reason that I don't find too many people that aren't using coaches or don't have mentors to be very believable in the long run. Feeling that not only can you do it on your own, but you have to do it on your own, to me is just it's a limiting factor that can't really be, overcome very often. And it's not somebody who I'm going to put a lot of faith and trust in.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Do you believe in your own profession enough to work with someone in your profession?
Right.
Alvin Cosgrove, I watched a video of his more than a few months back. And, he's a guy who does continuing education for personal trainers. And one of his first questions is, who in here is a personal trainer? Everybody raises their hand. And he goes, okay, how many of you have personal trainers? And nobody raised their hand. And he's like, well, how can you expect anybody else to believe in what you're doing if you don't even believe in it yourself? So I think it's safe to say that most any coach at most any level is going to have a coach. There's always the next level.
If you want to grow and make changes,
right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
It's like, you PhD in biochemistry, you probably utilized a lot of primary resources and knowledge and didn't try to go discover molecules yourself. You learn from the mistakes of others. You also stand on the body of knowledge.
Yeah. There's always someone else to bug.
I love it.
The benefit is really an eye in the sky, right? We're all super granular. We're dealing with our detailed day-to-day stuff. And a believable person, whether it be a coach, a mentor, or somebody in a mastermind, is going to help you kind of see what pitfalls lie ahead, because they have that 300,000-foot view, and they're just a little bit less granular in their thinking.
I think a big part of that is actually the experience factor. Someone who's been there and done that enough times not just personally, but professionally, as their job, as their vocation, as their passion, coached others through a process with repeated success, they're simply going to know the mistakes you're about to make before you make them and can, anticipate the needed course corrections to steer you in the right direction before much, if any, damage to your long-term progress is done. And that's just invaluable. The role, again, of a coach or a mentor is basically to save you from yourself. Oftentimes, people, they just have to touch the stove to find out it's hot. But a good mentor can help greatly limit those exposures and reduce the number of those mistakes along the way. And I just can't stress the benefit of that enough by having that outside objective source to literally save you from making, the mistakes you're going to make if you don't have direction.
Yeah, I think of Gary Vee's concept of clouds and dirt. The idea that you're either in the clouds, which is like big picture, long term, you kind of see the whole landscape, the position of being up in the clouds, and then there's dirt where it's super myopic, day-to-day details. If you have a good coach or a mentor, you really have the best of both worlds. So for example, I can, when it comes to Trevor being my coach or my mentor, I can focus on the day-to-day. I can put my food on the scale. I can make my food. I can do that day-to-day stuff. But Trevor's operating in the clouds. He's got that overarching, like he can see what may be coming in the future and what pitfalls are coming. And I'm operating in the dirt. I'm doing the work. From afar, he can say, hey, do this. And I say, okay. And then I do it. And it's really the benefits of having somebody in the clouds and being present and doing work in the dirt, so to speak.
That's actually a really good point you bring up. I think this is a good delineation between an objective third party and a coach. Because an objective third party is helpful even if it's not something in the field you want to progress in. Right? Because any person can be like, whoa, that's strange. Why do you do that? And then it would just force you to think about it. Right? That's actually like this a lot. The objective third party is helpful in its own right by having a non-biased, non-granular view of what you're doing. And maybe even more important, if they have zero experience in what you're doing, because the simple questions cause you to think about the fundamental aspects of whatever your behavior is. And the coach does have the mile-high view and the dirt view at the same time. And that's where, when you're looking to progress at a rapid rate, it does become helpful because they can project a little bit as far as, here's the course of action we are going to take, and we can't change the direction of the wind, but we can change the sails. Right?
Jim Rohn for the win.
Yeah. Okay. So excellent. I like that guy. He's good. He has a nice voice too. Soothing.
Yeah, his audiobooks put me to sleep.
Yeah, in a good way. Uncle Jim.
Oh, yeah. Trevor, I'm curious, just your viewpoint and how you maintain the ability to remain so objective. Because, I mean, some of us are really close and you're still the objective party, right? So just talk to me about the ability to remain objective and how you do that.
So I don't know how much of it is the nature-nurture thing, but I've been a scientist my entire life and really went from informally to formally trained in taking measurements, writing those measurements down, seeing what they mean in the context of how do I make an informed decision. And when you're working in a laboratory, well, it doesn't really matter a heck of a lot whether or not you have emotion involved. So from the non-humanistic standpoint, you have brought up like how do you run a business and be charitable at the same time or something like that, like you do them both separately. This is a very similar situation where if you treat it as if there is a subject and you are collecting data and you're making decisions based off of the data you collect, and there is a dehumanizing aspect to that decision-making process, absolutely. And then once that decision is made, well, okay, we've collected this data. The decision that makes the most sense is this. Okay, this is a decision that's going to be made. And then the coach part kicks in and says, okay, is this realistic for this human to do? And if not, you have the conversation. here's what I think the best decision is. I realize it may not be practical. How do we now meet in the middle to make it make most sense for you? So the objective decision is made first, whether or not it's practical, and then the practicality is discussed with the mentee.
You nailed something here, and I'm going to circle it back to what we've been talking about, that a great coach has a process and a system. When it comes time for me to evaluate, I'm not going to necessarily say that I take the Dr. House approach and believe that all people are liars. But at the same time, I'm like Dr. Cashy said, just the facts first, please. So when I go to analyze, a member's check-in or whatever, I'm going to look at all the objective information I have first in terms of their supplied, data that we track, the metrics we use to measure progress in certain physical regards, what their photos show, and all these things. And I'm going to actually make a decision on what the adjustment should be before looking at their subjective information. That way I know that I'm not getting clouded by feels or any of the stuff that may influence their decisions when I read it, because we do have connections with everybody we work with. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't let the subjective story influence that decision, but at least I know I have a solid founded objective base to go from before I analyze any of that subjective stuff. So if somebody explains that a spike or a jump may be attributed to something external,
I like attributed better.
Attributed was a good one.
Yes.
We'll move with that moving forward. TM. If it's attributed to something they can pinpoint a finger on, whether it's a stressful situation, got a flat tire, went out for sushi, got some bad news, whatever it is, then I may look at it and go, okay, that isn't food related. We can adjust this decision. But if I look at it and nothing in their subjective feedback causes any alarms or red flags, I know I'm not getting influenced by their feelings, which is, again, our whole job is to remain objective. So I kind of, like Dr. Cashy, take that split kind of approach on here's what the facts say, here's what the feels say, put my coach hat on and try to interpret both of them together to give you the best plan. And again, that all kind of, as Dr. Cashy intimated, relies on what we feel they can effectively accomplish. We get a whole lot of questions, what can I do more of? And the answer is probably a lot, but at what cost? Are you willing to do it? And that's part of, where are you able to execute? Are you coachable? Are you going to shut up and listen? If so, let's get to work done.
Yeah. This is where the data versus feedback concept is important in kind of how it was developed, because data isn't as important in the context of like what you do, Jonathan, to the member, right? The data is on the back end, but the feedback is on the front end. So we take the members' feedback very seriously and keep the data to ourselves. And like you said, combine those two things to make sure that we are making a decision that is functional for whoever's on the other side.
Absolutely. We want to hear your feels, but at the same time, we don't want to make decisions based on them, because that's what you've been doing your whole life.
Correct.
And that is why you have a coach, right? And we've really hammered home the coach side, the mentor side, but the mentor-mentee relationship is a two-way street. It's important to realize that being an effective mentee, being an effective client, member, student, there's a requirement on your end as well. And that is mainly leaving your ego at the door. So when you hire somebody, when I hire Trevor, when I say, hey, Dr. Cashy, do this for me, here's my money, it is my responsibility to assume the position of dependence. Kind of like going back to childhood, opening up, realizing that if I go into this thinking I know stuff, I'm not going to be open to learning new stuff. So you kind of have to go in ready for new possibilities and understand that this temporary state of submission or dependence doesn't reflect poorly on you as an individual. And I think that's hard, like submitting purposely to somebody. But it is a conscious choice that you are purposely making. You're taking this position of dependence to benefit you and absorb as much information as possible in your time with your coach or your mentor.
Yeah. Everything you have done in life up to this point, to today, has gotten you to exactly where you are. With fitness, with finances, your health, personally, professionally, emotionally. If you're happy with that, great. Keep on keeping on, keep doing what you're doing. It's working for you. But if you decide there are things you want to change, then you just have to make some changes. And part of that, a large part of that, is accepting the fact that you may not have all the answers. Or even if you do, you might lack the ability to execute them and remain objective about yourself enough to gauge progress and make the tough calls. Persistence in pursuits that are not moving you in the direction you want to go is not going to miraculously lead to the positive changes you're after. Repeating the same thing while expecting a different outcome is probably the most maddening thing a person can do from the outside watching someone do it, yet it's something we see all too often and far too frequently to make any sense. Sometimes you just got to give up the reins. If it's not working, do something that is. Find someone that can help.
There's this metaphor I like to bring up where I call it become the child. The child's going between divorced parents. Where like the kid wants something and asks mom and the mom says no, and then go ask dad and the dad says yes. And now the parents are kind of pitted against each other. And the practical implication of something like this is that sometimes when you need advice or direction on something, you may not like the answer you get. And going around and asking as many people as possible until you get an answer you do like may not be the best course of action. So that's just a little caveat I want to add, is that if you want a certain answer, if you ask around and look around enough, you will probably get that answer, and clinging to it for your dear life may not be the best decision to make.
And when you're doing that, you're looking for somebody just to confirm or affirm what you already know.
Yeah, you're looking for
affirmation.
Yeah, affirmation versus getting help. Correct.
If you've already decided what the answer is, there's a great chance you can go about finding it somewhere. And
exactly.
if you've already decided that's it, that confirmation bias is strong, and you're gonna stick with it forever. And that is not very objective.
You will find somebody to take your money to agree with you.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have a coach or a hive mind community of some sort to expand your belief system or challenge you or tell you no when you want to hear yes, or tell you yes when you want to hear no, you're just leaving a lot of progress, whether it be whatever you consider success, money, happiness, you're just leaving a lot of it on the table. So we kind of covered like the do-it-yourself, long, painful process. If you want the end result, not the best way to go. Coaching can be done with you, or it can be done for you. And we don't have time now, but we'll get into the differences on the next one and really determine what kind of coaching, what kind of mentorship is going to benefit you the most.
We couldn't figure out how to end this one. We tried to tie it into weather, geology, telescopes, and microscopes, and came up with nothing. So our mentor just advised us to shut up and tell you to keep working on getting better every day.
You've been listening to the Relentless Podcast. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to keep getting a little bit better every day, do us a favor, head over to iTunes, subscribe, leave us an honest review, and be sure not to miss the next one.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.